The title for this video would have been so much cooler with 30 novels in 3 months. But, 28 isn't bad, and I will take it. If you're new here, my name is Katja, and today I'm sharing the 28 books I read from January through to March. You can use the chapters if you want to skip to a specific group of books. We'll start off with translated fiction. And number one, we've got Almond. This scores a 4.2 on Goodreads, and that rating feels right to me. Considering it was highlighted by 2 BTS members, it has close to 30,000 ratings and is a well-known translated novel. In Almond, we meet a Korean teenager struggling with a rare emotional impairment. This is a sensitive exploration of life lived at the emotional poles. My thanks to V at the Sassy Library Fox for reading this with me. I think Almond lends itself really well to a buddy read or even a book club read. It has so many scenes and characters that are brilliant for discussing and unpicking with someone else that you get different perspectives. The next 2 books are short story collections translated from Korean, which I have discussed in my video a couple of days ago. The realism in the 7 stories in Shoko's Smile meant this read was perfection for me, and this gets 5 stars. Cursed Bunny was surreal, and the 10 stories range from body horror to sci-fi to ghost stories. A solid 4 stars from me. Since recording my original video for these 2 books, I have also asked another channel, the Codex Cantina, to do a deep dive of one of the stories in Shoko's Smile, so look out for their in-depth discussion of Sin Chao, which touches on the South Korean involvement in the Vietnam War and includes a range of compelling themes. Cursed Bunny has a Goodreads rating of 4.08, which I think is fair, and Shoko's Smile has a Goodreads rating of 4.08 too, which of course I think is too low. It's one of my favorite reads of the year. Winter in Sokcho has a Goodreads rating of 3.64, which again, I can understand, but personally this scores no lower than a 4 for me. It's not the sort of book that I'm going to go recommending to all my friends because I know some of them are going to hate it. They would dislike the lack of resolution and the seeming lack of plot. So who would I recommend it to, and why am I so adamant that it shouldn't score less than a 4, which it is doing on Goodreads? I'll be sharing that in a full review of this book next week, but for now I'll share the premise. It's winter in Sokcho, a tourist town on the border of South and North Korea, and we have a young French-Korean woman working at a tired guest house as a receptionist. One evening, an unexpected guest arrives, someone quite interesting, a French cartoonist determined to find inspiration in this desolate landscape. Number 5, Grass. Goodreads rating of 4.48. I've given this a full 5 stars. Grass is a powerful anti-war graphic novel. It tells the story of a Korean girl forced into sexual slavery for the Japanese Imperial Army during the Second World War, and this is non-fiction. It speaks of childhoods lost and futures stalled. Number 6, Kim Jeong, born 1982, Goodreads rating of 4.18. It's a Korean bestseller and chronicles the struggles of women against endemic sexism. The plot has a nearly cradle-to-grave structure, but we don't follow Jeong into an actual grave at an old age. Instead, we meet her in her early 30s when she's going through a death of sorts, a death of hopes and dreams, of personality and individuality. The story examines how we got there. The tone is clinical and underpinned with statistics on gender in South Korea. Number 7, Convenience Store Woman. Goodreads rating 3.73, and I would up that to a 4 at least. This is a clever look at modern work culture, societal expectations on conformism, and more. One of the most well-known pieces of translated Japanese fiction today. I loved the unique point of view provided in the main character's first-person narration. Next up, we have fantasy and science fiction. Number 8, Fangs. Goodreads rating of 4.28, which sounds right to me. A love story between a 300-year-old vampire and a werewolf. And It's just a satisfying, really comfy, cozy read, which I'd highly recommend if you're into graphic novels. Number 9, When the Tiger Came Down the Mountain. Goodreads rating of 4.24. I'm more a 4-star on this. I preferred the first book from the series. They are all standalone, but the first one was better. The reader returns to the Empire of An and the singing Hild cycle for this standalone follow-up to the Empress of Salt and Fortune. I love the world building and magical realism. The people in the story stumble across a band of hungry tigers and resort to a night of storytelling to ensure their safety, as you would. LGBTQ plus representation and a dreamscape-like setting. Number 10, Inadequate Air. It's the third book in the Bridge Kingdom, so perhaps not something to pick up directly. You'd have to read the first two. Goodreads rating of 4.25, which I think is fair. A solid fantasy adventure that ties in beautifully with the rest of the series. Some of the happenings are not new to readers of the previous two books, but it does provide a different perspective from different leads. Number 11, Vita Nostra. Fantasy, yes, and dark academia. Goodreads rating of 4.07 and I'd rate it a 4.5. It is a trippy, dark academia novel, part of a trilogy that I believe only this novel has been translated from the Ukrainian in so far. So the writing is beautiful and surreal. The feel is dark and foreboding. The plot is fascinating and intellectually mind-bending. Two novels from the Discworld series, which I've talked about in the dedicated live shows, so I won't go into them too much. I've hosted those live shows with Scott at Gunpowder Fiction and Plot, Seek Heavy, and Rosie Cockshut. So we have done the read-alongs for Equal Rights and Mort, which were both wonderful comfort reads this winter. If you're a Terry Pratchett fan, you might like to join us for another read-along of Discworld in May, and that is for Sorcery, which runs from the 13th to the 20th of May. Clara and the Sun by Kazuo Ishiguro, and that is 3.79 on Goodreads, which I think sounds fair. It was a book club hit for my physical book club locally, and I think it would probably have had a higher rating overall if it weren't a concept that we are most now familiar with in science fiction. We are looking at a haunting story about a disposable society and the loneliness our attitudes can perpetuate. 15. To be taught if fortunate. Goodreads rating of 4.21, which feels fair, but I won't be going over a 4 for this one. To be Taught If Fortunate is a novella from Becky Chambers set in a future that my grandchildren might occupy, if I had children. 4 astronauts set out from a world that has come together to fund space exploration. It's a world that clearly values education and learning, but soon we find that's not unanimous. Greedy corporations and political factors lead to climate catastrophe and wars, things that the crew discovers each time they receive a news bundle. I enjoyed the discovery of different planets with the characters and think this would have been better served being a full novel rather than a novella so that we could get to know the crew much better. Number 16, Remnant Population. Goodreads reviewers have collectively given this a 4.09 and it's a 4.5 stars for me. For 40 years, Colony 3245.12 has been Ophelia's home. On this planet, far away in space and time from the world of her youth, she has lived and loved, weathered the death of her husband, raised one surviving child, lovingly tended her garden, and grown old. And it is here that she fully expects to finish out her years, until the shifting corporate fortunes of the Sims Bancorp company dictates that Colony 3245.12 is to be disbanded and its residents shipped off deep in cryosleep to somewhere new and strange and not of their choosing. But while her fellow colonists grudgingly anticipate a difficult move and readjustment to some far-flung other world, Ophelia savors the promise of a golden opportunity. We find out that after everyone's cleared out, the planet is actually already inhabited by people native to it, and Ophelia is about to experience first contact for all mankind. It has a couple of slow spots, but on the whole, it's a great comfort read. Next up, I have the Booktube prize books, and spoiler alert, my two favorite books from the fiction category Group D made it through to the next round of the Booktube prize. And they are The Trees and The Island of Missing Trees. So many trees. Number 17, The Island of Missing Trees, which has a Goodreads rating of 4.22, which I agree with. Following the hardships and loss borne by a fictional family from late 20th century Cyprus to present day London, part of the narrative with memories of the past come from the family fig tree. I thought this a good exploration by Elif Shafak of the terrible cost of the long conflict between Greek and Turkish Cypriots on the people and their environment. I think for some readers the plot might be a bit too tidy. Everything is provided to the reader, and while there's a mystery of two men, most of the narrative provides little in the way of having to puzzle things out. It didn't take away from my enjoyment. Like I said, it was one of my favorites of the six that were assigned to me to read and judge. Number 18, A Passage North by Anouk Arud Pragasam, and this has a Goodreads rating of 3.75, which I agree with. Expect lots of flashbacks as the narrator looks back on his life, sometimes seemingly with regret for things unsaid to family and friends, sometimes with perplexity at the conclusion of a confusing romance. The pace of this novel is slow and reflective, and it's quite beautiful in places. Number 19, Matrix by Lauren Groff, which has a 3.77 rating on Goodreads, and I wouldn't give this less than a 4. Unlike anything I was expecting, does the narrator really have visions that allow her to make the best decisions for the nuns in her care? Set in early medieval Europe, this book centers around the life of an abbess who learns to seize and hold power, and in so doing shapes the lives of those around her. Number 20, Small Things Like These. It has a rating of 4.23 on Goodreads, and that feels about right. As Christmas approaches in an Irish community in 1985, a man uncovers abuse at a Magdalen laundry in this riveting novella. I enjoy the reflections of the main character as he moves away from being much like the rest of his community and finds himself finally acting in ways that he feels are good and kind. 21, Open Water. I gave this 4 and it currently has a Goodreads rating of 4.17. I struggled with the narrative style at the start, but very much enjoyed the compelling love story and the celebration of Black British artists. The book also looks at the way systemic racism has crept into every aspect of the lives of young Black men and the impact it has on their well-being. Number 22, The Trees, 4.28 on Goodreads, and it's a 5-star read for me. It has dark humor and is just so different to much I've read in recent years. I go into more detail in the original Booktube Prize video, but suffice to say it's wonderfully scathing about the stupidity of racism. And 6 more novels, all grouped together: graphic, contemporary, feminist, historical fiction, mystery, and classic. Number 23, Forget Me Not, graphic novel. It has a Goodreads rating of 4.42. I've given this a full 5 stars. A lovely graphic novel. Clemence, a student and actress struggling with personal issues, breaks her grandmother out of a nursing home. Being pursued by the police doesn't deter her from continuing her road trip with her Grammy, who has Alzheimer. Number 24, We Need New Names by No Violet Bulawayo. It has a Goodreads rating of 3.74, which I can understand, but personally it doesn't fall below a 4 for me. Now, the reason I say I can understand the lower rating is because I can assume this is a result of some hard to process triggers. There are many triggers for violence, including sexual violence and the abuse of a child. There's also the deaths of 2 dogs described in unsparing detail. These are not the main focus of the novel, but they are shocking scenes and will stay with the reader. Darling and her friends live in a shanty called Paradise, which of course is no such thing. Darling thinks it's not all that bad. Yes, all the teachers have left and things seem to be falling apart around them. The adults are all stressed. But she and her friends run wild, and while the adults are struggling to put food on the table, they get into mischief, stealing guavas from the trees in the white suburb. They play Find Bin Laden and sing Lady Gaga at the tops of their voices. When Darling gets to go to her own paradise and heads to America, there is where the focus of the book is. It's a real exploration around, right, she no longer has starvation as a close threat, but this new paradise is going to bring its own set of challenges for her and also for those she's left behind. King Kong Theory, Goodreads rating 4.01, and my rating is more a 3.5. This packs a punk style punch. It's rude, crude, and unapologetic in its examination of gender roles and more. The experiences of the author are miles away from mine, but I found an understanding of her arguments. Not my usual style of book, but I appreciated being shocked and challenged. Expect triggers. The Ashes of London, Goodreads rating 3.73, which feels fair, but I won't be going over a 3. This was a workplace book club read, a historical fiction novel which centers on the Great Fire of London in 1666. We meet political manipulators and religious fundamentalists struggling behind the scenes to control the kingdom. Sadly, the most likable character was way too stabby for my tastes. A good novel that I would have enjoyed even more if the characters had been more relatable and remotely pleasant. 27. The Paris Apartment, Goodreads rating of 3.73, which I agree with. Jess needs a fresh start. She's broken alone and she's left a job under less than ideal circumstances. And her half brother Ben doesn't sound thrilled when she asks if she can crash with him for a bit. But he also doesn't say no, and surely everything will look better from Paris. So when she shows up to find a very nice apartment, which can Ben really afford, she is baffled to find he's not there. I think this is a solid murder mystery novel and perfect for readers who enjoy twists and turns and characters with dubious intent. I found it to be a page turner, but I do think it's got quite a few critics on Goodreads. And there was a point where I had to employ suspension of disbelief. Still, I enjoyed it. 28. This is not the best one to finish on. The Scarlet Letter, a classic. Goodreads rating is 3.43. Now, most of us know this one from high school, and as a teen, I enjoyed the story of Hester and her daughter Pearl and what it means to be ostracized in a community for adultery. But goodness, the narrative style of this was so dense, and I just felt like I can't believe I enjoyed this when I first read it as a teenager. It is so dull. Perhaps more than other classics that I still enjoy, I struggled with the writing. But I will just leave it there and stop complaining. I have had overall a really, really good first quarter of 2022 in terms of books. That's it. You know, let me know in the comments if you've read any of these books or intend to read any of these books. I'd love to hear your thoughts, and thanks so much for joining me. Take care. Bye.